You're listening to What It's Like with Luz, a podcast highlighting ordinary people doing extraordinary things. I'm your host Lucy Norris, and on today's episode, I'm picking the brains of the founder of H2H, an Irish clothing brand donating 10% of sales to mental health organisations. Growing up, this week's guest was a keen entrepreneur before he even knew the meaning of the word. From committing to his daily paper round to selling iPhone covers in school, his dedication to hard work only grew stronger as the years went on. Leaving for America, he could never have guessed that a global pandemic would lead him to create his very own clothing brand, and all for a good cause too. Chatting to me about his mission, navigating competition in a saturated online market, and the small business advantage, here's what it's like to be Mark Donnelly. Welcome, Mark. Thank you so much for coming on and chatting with me today. How I like to kick off every episode is just with a bit of background for everyone and to get to know you a bit more. So can you share a bit about what it was like for you growing up in Meath and where that first entrepreneurial spark came from?
Yeah, of course. So basically, growing up, I've always kind of had that desire to either work for myself, do some good, and I always wanted to kind of make my own money. And over the years, I think it's kind of like cliche, and I feel like anyone who runs their own business says the same few things, but I actually ran a paper round, and from the age of maybe 10 to 13 or 14, and every Sunday morning I just deliver newspapers to like local neighbours and people around my town. And I just continued with my own sort of stuff. I was always the guy kind of in school who would win the like tutor awards for like extracurricular in terms of like entrepreneurial stuff and the entrepreneurial awards. Whether it was like buying and selling like, I don't know, iPod cases back in the day or phone cases, phone covers, anything I could really get my hands on. It was like that over the years. I always kind of had that drive to either sell stuff or make my own money. And that was probably throughout my younger teens, and then into my late teens, I just had a really good work ethic. I always worked. So from 12 to like 16, I did my own kind of smaller bits. And then 16, 17, I got straight into working in a bar where I would either just stock the bar or during the day clean the bar out. And from then on, I just never didn't work. I never didn't have a job, whether it was I bartended for 4 years, 5 years, and then I went to college and I did it all through college part-time, and then I went on to study retail services and management at DIT. So from kind of the age of 12 to now, I've never not worked, and I've always kind of wanted to make my own money and do my own thing.
So I suppose before we jump into the logistics of the business and all of that kind of thing, why mental health? Why did you feel passionate about this subject that you wanted to emulate it in your business?
Yeah, so it's funny because when I first started, I didn't really know where I wanted to take it. I just knew I wanted to start something up. And I was living in the States for 18 months. And I knew after those 18 months, COVID had hit. I'm going to be unemployed once I got home. So I got my thinking cap on. I was like, Mark, okay, you need to start something up here or find a job. But the pandemic, of course, had a major effect. And it dawned on me that a lot of people who wouldn't experience or think they would experience issues with their mental health are being affected with the pandemic. And I felt it too, and I think everyone did, where there was just days where you're like, nobody knows what's going on, nobody knows when this is going to end. So I kind of just thought, well, maybe this is a good way to set up a business and do good at the same time while raising money and awareness for a really good cause. And I just feel like mental health in particular, everyone is affected by it in every single corner of the globe, no matter who you are, where you're from, what you do, what language you speak. You have your own thoughts and you deal with your own mental health, whether it's on a small or a really, really large scale. So I just thought it was a good way of employing myself and also doing good at the same time. And that's kind of where the idea came from.
Yeah, I think it's really cool. And especially, as you said, in this climate, it's hit so many people. But I'd also be curious to know from you now, kind of working in that area and I guess interacting with cases a bit more, why do you think there is still a stigma around speaking about your mental health and around being open about when you're struggling?
For me in particular, I think that stigma, it mainly focuses around young males from my experience, and I think a lot of people see that and experience it too, that typically females have an easier time to speak about it. Well, not to speak about it, but it's more approachable from their perspective, because young males, and from what I've experienced in both the bar industry and then also playing a lot of GAA, football and hurling over the years. They're kind of areas where young men are meant to be macho, aggressive, and not really be in touch with their emotions. So I think the stigma, it kind of stems from maybe the cultures from around the world where the man is meant to be the alpha male who takes care of everyone, and like these backwards kind of ideologies of what men are supposed to be and what they're supposed to do. And I personally think it stems from old cultures and just kind of how our parents and our grandparents, all them were raised over the years. And it's kind of come down from the top. And unfortunately, that's why there's a stigma surrounding it, because we're meant to be seen. And don't get me wrong, it applies to both men and women. I'm just using my perspective as an example. But unfortunately, the stigma is surrounded because of that, because people are meant to be seen, and in men in particular, to kind of bottle up their feelings in a way, because it's not really, it wasn't, and it's kind of seen as not the dumb thing to do for a man to express himself.
But I suppose taking everything all the way back to the very beginning, to the initial idea, how was that for you? How did it come about? And then how did you start taking steps towards making it a reality?
Yeah, of course. So as I kind of briefly touched on there, I was in the States for 18 months and I worked for an Irish whiskey company. It was honestly one of the best jobs, probably the best job I'll ever have. It was a dream job, and I represented the brand for the state of Wisconsin for 18 months. Then I mentioned the pandemic hit towards the end of it. So my job was based in bars and restaurants 7 days a week. And once the pandemic hit, so we had a lot of free time. I was still in the States. My visa wasn't in until July. So I had this idea of H2H in the back of my head for maybe a year. And because I was just working so much, I could never act on it. And then we had no work to do. So it was a perfect time to kind of get the ball rolling with something. And as I said, I didn't really know if I wanted to take it down the mental health route just yet, but as the pandemic kind of went on, I decided to do so. So the H2H idea came about from experiences in the GAA, experiences in the nightlife and spirits industry. Like a lot of people throughout football and hurling over the years, I have experienced that they just don't want to talk about it, and because of the stigma. And then also the alcohol industry. I worked in bars, I worked in the States selling whiskey. And you just see these long hours, late nights, alcohol-fueled situations where people, especially bartenders and bar staff in particular, don't really get a break, and they're drinking a lot of alcohol, they're not getting a lot of sleep, they're very anxious, and like their mental health is not being looked after. It's more so all play, no rest. So I've seen a lot of that there. Too, some mental health issues, and people just kind of not in the position or not comfortable to talk to people about it. So I decided one day, after a lot of kind of thought and design, well, not so much design, but HUH was the kind of concept I wanted to go, meaning how's your head. So for anyone out there listening who doesn't know, HUH is how's your head. We're an Irish mental health club company donating 10% of our sales every month to charity. And I one day thought of this phrase, how's your head? And then I thought of HUH, and I was like, it's a simple design, very simplistic, and it wouldn't look bad in a hoodie. So I decided to just print it. And I just decided to wear it around Milwaukee and Chicago where I was living. And what I wanted to do and the response I wanted is the response I got. The first day I wore it, someone was like, huh? So right then and there, the first time I wore the hoodie, someone asked me what it meant. And my idea behind it is every single time I want it to happen, because now the conversation around mental health has started, but we didn't even try to start it.
That's so clever. I love that. I already thought the name was really cool, but I didn't even associate that whole phrase with like asking a question, which is so clever. And then I suppose just from a purely business aspect, taking out the fact that you're dedicating your business to, supporting a really important cause, did you have any fears in terms of entering the online clothing space, or any worries that it might be, difficult to sell your products online against a lot of other brands that are on there? I know yours has a USP with the mental health aspect, but, just from your business brain, what were your feelings entering into that market space?
So I think things through very differently, and no matter what I decided to do, whether it was hoodies or wristbands or shoes, I always and commit to an idea, and I think I'll carve my own way out here, and I'll find the customers I need to find. And so, of course, I'm very conscious of the competition, but there was one thing in my head that I always say is, if I wait for it to be perfect, I'll never do it. So it was a case of, there's so much competition. There are absolutely millions and billions of clothing retailers out there. And if I sit here and worry about them, I'm never going to do it. So my thought was, build a good reputable brand, build a good reputable brand, get good quality products, get the social media firing, and you'll find your way. And don't worry about the competition. And in doing that, it kind of made me learn so much, and it kept me motivated, because I knew there's people out there. I knew my target market was out there. It's just a matter of finding them. So I think a lot of people are kind of nearly afraid to do their own thing, be it in the fashion industry, be it whatever it is, starting their own business. So I think people are kind of afraid of, one, what people might think, two, that they're not going to last because there's too much competition. But it's all about kind of just carving your own way. As you said, I have the unique selling point of what we do and our donations. But on top of that, you have to think of the customer service. I think is also a huge unique selling point for me. And I knew, and I kind of work on this every single day. So unique selling point, donations, great. But the even bigger one that I do, and people don't really see it unless they're a customer, is my customer service. So I reply to 99.9% of people who email me, Instagram DM me, Facebook message me. And my idea behind that is, for example, if you buy a hoodie off me and you want to return it for a different size, yes, it's a pain in my head because it's going to cost me money. But when I do the return, for the sake of maybe €6, I'll just won't buy 2 or 3 coffees that week. You know what I mean? I'll save that €6 from coffees. If there's a return, send it to a return, and that customer is more than likely going to come back because of the service I provide. That's one thing I work hard on, and it kind of tries to separate me from the competition in terms of the kind of fears or maybe worrying about if it would take off because of the vast amount of competition out there. One thing I love to say to people, and I love to implement myself, is so like David versus Goliath, okay? So you have the big and the small guy. So for example, let's say me versus, let's just use Nike as an example, because I know I'm in the mental health space. We're not kind of direct competition, but at the end of the day, they're still selling quality hoodies. So I'm still in competition with them. So what I do is, I'm the small guy, and for anyone out there who may be trying to get into business or who's in it, I'm the small guy, you're the small guy, use it to your advantage. So for example, Nike aren't out there handwriting letters. They're not putting small bags of Haribo. So whatever kind of personal touches you can do to get that advantage over the vast amount of competition out there, you need to do it. So the minute you open your order and you see whether it's a thank you note, a bag of sweets, whatever you might throw in, the remaining parts of that package or box, for example, a hoodie, is already gone up in their estimations because they're like, whoa, this is really cool, personal touch. So I always say, use the small guy advantage when you can, and then when the time comes, use the big guy advantage when you can. So when you're the big company, you use your economies of scale, you buy in bulk, you get your prices down, you get top quality garments, and you can sell it at a cheaper price. And hopefully it comes to the stage where I can do that. But I will probably continue, no matter how big it gets, is the handwritten notes and the little bag of sweets, just for the personal touch.
It's so true. I think it makes such a monumental difference as well, because it's just showing the customer that you care too. And it's an element that, I haven't actually heard anyone so far speak on it. So it's so interesting to hear how you implemented it to set yourself apart from the rest. But it's such a presumably simple thing. I know it probably takes up so much of your time, but it makes such a big difference.
Yeah.
That's so interesting to hear. So then what, now that I suppose you've got everything up and running to a place where you're happy with it. I know you mentioned, how like it will grow in another year, which of course it will, but what's your overall goal, I suppose, with this? Where do you want to take it?
Yeah, so I think in the long term, if I could dream up of a scenario that I'd love HUH to be in countries all over the world. As I mentioned, no matter who you are, where you're from, what you believe in, what language you speak, we're all affected by our thoughts and our mental health, whether it's on a small or large scale, and the pandemic has definitely highlighted that. So ideally, I'd love if we were shipping H2H hoodies all over the world. Like, there's a huge demand in the States, which I haven't really tapped into yet. Ireland is really like such good support. The UK has gotten a bit messy now with Brexit, but that's a different conversation for a different day. And then like all over Europe. So, not to mention the Middle East, so many Irish people out there, Australia. So I think the long-term goal would be like to zone in on the Irish community around the world and raise awareness there, and hopefully it kind of expands and mushroom from there. So I think kind of on a global scale, I'd love H2H to grow. I know I'm going to take it day by day. That's a long term. And also on the long term, I'd love to do some kind of public speaking. And don't get me wrong, I'm not qualified. I'm not trained, but in terms of helping people with mental illness. But I think I'd love to do some public speaking in terms of kind of health and well-being on a smaller scale, and also a bit of entrepreneurship / social media, where it could be kind of like these podcasts where you talk about how I built a brand, why I did it. And I think it'd be cool if I could go around the place or go to companies or even around the world, let's say, and have kind of a talk that does raise awareness for mental health, and then also brings attention to my brand.
Yeah, for sure. I think you've got a busy few years ahead of you, but it all sounds really exciting. And I hope, that it does all work out for you. I'm sure that it will, because you've built such a strong brand with such an amazing message. And it's so important what you're trying to do, opening the conversation. So yeah, props to you with that. And I just have one more question for you, and I'm going to let you go after that. If I put your 10-year-old self in front of you now, when you were, selling your papers and all that kind of thing, to being on the other end of building this incredible brand, what's the biggest piece of advice you would give that 10-year-old self moving forward?
Oh, wow. That's a really tough question. I love these questions. I love hearing people answer these questions, but
yeah, I do as well. That's why I ask to everyone. I know, sorry, but it's so interesting to hear each person's advice.
Yeah, definitely. So if I had my 10-year-old self, I'm kind of just buying time here. I think like the two main things I'd say is, number one, don't care what anyone thinks. So as long as you're not hurting anyone or yourself, do what you want to do and do what makes you happy. So we've seen a lot in recent years that people can make a living and happiness out of a lot of different things. Like you've seen in the last 10 years how the gaming sector and YouTube has made people into millionaires, and they're just doing what they love. So there's a lot of people out there who look down at that sort of stuff, like that's not a real job. So one of the first pieces of advice is, don't care what people think, do what you love and love what you do, and you'll be happy forever. Because there's just too many people out there who are kind of keeping up with appearances and worrying what your mother's cousin's brother is going to say, you know what I mean? Or what the neighbors are thinking across the road when you're, whatever you're doing, you know what I mean? So it's kind of, don't really care what anyone thinks, and whatever you do, just 100% commit to it.
Those are really good pieces of advice. I love the commitment one as well, because I think now it's such a trend to start a business, especially in like COVID times and things. Everyone's just like, just be productive, just start a business. It's like, no, but you need to be committed to it. You need to actually want to do it, for it to last, as you've demonstrated. But yeah, and the not caring what people think, that's like a lot of people say that, but I suppose the reason why people are always saying it is because we struggle so much to do it. I don't know why, but it's one of the hardest things you'll ever learn to do, I think.
It's easier said than done.
Yeah, it's so true. So yeah, I just want to say thank you so much for giving up your morning to chat to me and share your story. It's been so interesting.
No problem at all. Thanks for having me on.
Thank you so much for listening, and as always, please rate, share and leave a comment if you like what you hear, and don't forget to follow @WhatIt'sLikePod on Instagram and Facebook. To find out more about H2H and to shop the clothing line, visit the links provided in the show notes. I'll be back on Thursday with more inspiring stories, but for now this has been What It's Like with Luce.